welcome to the House of ZK Radio, which is a focused podcast and media channel exploring everything ZK, zero knowledge. All right, thank you, Ashley. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first interview session of the day for the Bitcoin Economy Conference. We're joined here with Eli Ben-Sasson, co-founder and CEO of StarkWare. Eli and StarkWare are leading contributors to ZK, pioneering Starks, Cairo language, StarkNet, and StarkX, to name a few, and are currently working to bring ZK to Bitcoin. I'm very excited to discuss with Eli the fundamental reasons behind scaling Bitcoin, how ZK can help support this goal, and why StarkWare specifically is uniquely positioned to contribute. So I'm wondering, Eli, if we can talk a little bit more about the needs behind Bitcoin scaling. What do you see as the core limitations of Bitcoin's base layer that necessitate different scaling solutions, new scaling solutions?
Yeah, so hi, Alice. Thanks for having me here. Hello to everyone out there. The basic problem of Bitcoin in terms of scaling right now is very clear. It is the cost of transactions, the time till you see them settle, but mostly just the cost of transaction and the sheer amount of transactions that it can process, right? Visa processes, thousands of transactions per second. Alipay does hundreds of thousands per second, and Bitcoin does 10 per second. And we can't have that with the global economy. You need more.
Mm-hmm. And so mostly it's just the current cost of transactions, time to see them settle, and then the processing as well. Got it.
Yep.
And from your perspective, how could a more scalable Bitcoin ecosystem transform broader mainstream adoption, broader economic applications? And why is StarkWare, which was originally known primarily for its Ethereum focused, now looking at Bitcoin? What's the motivation to build towards settling simultaneously both on Bitcoin and Ethereum?
So I know that I think in some places in the Pacific Islands, there was money in the form of like these huge pieces of stone, right? That served as money. And moving them from one place to the other of course, took a lot of effort. So Bitcoin is a little bit like that in being like just very hard to move around in terms of costly. So number one thing you would get from scaling Bitcoin is just the ability to use it like we use, cash today or electronic payments, that we can, for instance, buy a cup of coffee with our Bitcoin. Right now, it doesn't make any sense to buy a cup of coffee with the Bitcoin because the transaction fee is way higher than the cost of a cup of coffee, right? So you would like to have Bitcoin usable for buying cups of coffee. This is, by the way, literally Satoshi's vision, and the reason he invented Bitcoin, right? The paragraph number 2 in the Bitcoin white paper talks about the high cost of the transactions today on the traditional system, which is due to the manual process involved, right? There are people involved in the traditional financial system, and Bitcoin removes that. But right now, it just can't process that many transactions, which leads to these very high costs. Now, once you allow money to move around or Bitcoin to move around more freely and for smaller transactions, now you start having a lot more interesting use cases that could appear with it, right? Could be more easily lent and borrowed. It could form as, in a more easier way as collateral for small and large transactions. You could treat it a little bit more like a basis for an economy, which is what we needed to do. Now, I think you also asked, like, why are we also expanding to Bitcoin and not just Ethereum? So, I used to be a mathematician. I was a professor of theoretical computer science at Technion. And the exact point in time that I started veering away from my path as an academic was at a Bitcoin conference in 2013, where I was the first to point out that ZK proofs and cryptographic proofs can help scale Bitcoin. So it's been my dream and passion for more than 11 years to offer this technology to Bitcoin. And my Twitter handle says that I am a ZK Stark Maxi, which is exactly what I am. I'm not a Bitcoin Maxi. I'm not an Ethereum Maxi. I am a ZK Stark Maxi. And I know that this technology will be deployed everywhere. It's the safest, it's the purest kind of scaling technology that really Bitcoin, the purest cryptocurrency, deserves. So we started with Ethereum. It was much easier to do it there because you had smart contracts available there, so we could do Stark verification on it. But now I'm optimistic that Bitcoin will also have someday a soft fork that will allow us to offer more scale through ZK Starks.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really like the analogy that you use of those huge pieces of stone. I believe they're also called the rise stones. At least one kind of civilization used them, and how Bitcoin now is a bit similar to that in terms of it's very hard to move around. It's hard to scale currently just because of the costs with processing. But I do also like how you mentioned that our main goal here is to make Bitcoin more accessible for these everyday transactions, like buying a cup of coffee, and hopefully as we can build towards that vision. And I just wanted to also ask you a bit about some of the narratives that we see evolving. You mentioned that as we build towards this vision, we can enable more use cases, like, for example, with lending and borrowing, with collateral, and really making Bitcoin as a basis for this new kind of economy. So how do you see the narratives for Bitcoin evolving by scaling Bitcoin, by enabling more transactions, by enabling these new applications? Can we expect a change from its current digital gold narrative?
Yes, I think that Bitcoin today is the purest way for you to own your assets, to own your life in the digital world. Nothing gives you the same level of true ownership of your assets. But right now, it's very hard for you to move those assets and to use them as money. So with a scaling solution that would be fully self-custodial, have the same security as Bitcoins, which is exactly what StarkNet settling onto Bitcoin will allow you, you will get not digital gold or these digital big stones, you will get digital cash, cheap, fast, no friction, but truly owned by you, not deposited with some financial institution or custodian or centralized exchange that may disappear tomorrow. You will own this cash.
Mm-hmm. And I really like how we can have that transition from not just having digital gold, but digital cash that's completely ownable by the individual. And I also, just on the topic for StarkNet settling onto Bitcoin, I'm wondering if you can speak a bit more about some of the advantages and also perhaps some challenges that you're foreseeing in implementing StarkNet as a layer 2 on Bitcoin. Are there any kinds of lessons learned from the Ethereum rollup implementations that can directly apply to Bitcoin, whether it be some security considerations, data availability, or any other kinds of considerations?
Yeah, I would say that, we learned a lot and we're constantly learning. Certainly by the time StarkNet settles on Bitcoin directly, it will be a much more battle-tested system, much more robust, have much more usage, which is good. So a whole bunch of lessons on how to build the very best L2 on Ethereum will, of course, be transferred to Bitcoin. I want to focus on the challenges. There are a lot of novel challenges that are related to Bitcoin. The model itself is very, very different. There are no such thing as accounts and smart contracts. You have to sort of use the script and UTXO model which isn't built to maintain state. So now you want to use it to actually also allow you to capture and maintain state over time. So huge challenges in implementing this. But I wake up in the morning, and what gets me going is huge challenges, right? When I co-founded StarkWare, no one believed that ZK Starks are going to be the end game. I mean, except for us, and it was a huge challenge. And now everyone has adopted this technology. So it is a very big challenge, and it's a challenge that we are going to very eagerly. It's part of our DNA to take big challenges.
Mm-hmm. And then you mentioned that there's these kinds of novel challenges that are unique to Bitcoin, like compared to Ethereum, uses this UTXO instead of an account-based model, and there's lack of smart contracts, and there's some limitations in terms of its scripting. I'm just wondering if you can speak a bit more about what is really needed to enable general computation on Bitcoin. There are a few developments in this space that can, for example, enable or help enable more general computation, whether it be smart contracts via covenants. Maybe there are some opportunities that you can speak about specifically that Starks can apply. And then also with the possibility in the future of the potential implementation of OpCat. I'm wondering if you can dive a little bit more into some of the tools that you see as most promising for enabling this general computation within Bitcoin.
Yeah, so terrific question. The fundamental limitation today of Bitcoin is that there's this complete separation of the previous what authorizes you to spend a Bitcoin, and there are just no limitations on once you show that you own a Bitcoin. There are like no limitations on how you spend it and what you do with it. Now, a covenant would be something that allows the user interested in this to put some limitation, to say whoever now receives this Bitcoin must conform to certain spending ways. It can't be spent nilly-willy. So today, covenants, well, there was just this beautiful breakthrough result that two folks from our team, together with Andrew Polstra and Ethan Hellman. So Avihu Levi, our CPO, and Victor Kolobov from our product team, together with Ethan and Andrew, just published this beautiful KaleidoScript paper that shows that actually even today, for a very hefty price, you can get covenants on Bitcoin today. But it's not known yet how to get covenants for a lower price. So covenants is one big challenge. But once you have covenants, either by paying a lot and doing the KaleidoScript kind of way, or if you allow OpCat, there are a bunch of other variant opcodes that would allow you to have covenants, but OpCat is maybe, I think, the one that is most spoken about. Then you could have covenants, and you could put certain restrictions, and you could have Bitcoin going to something that is, the covenant is an L2 that verifies a Stark. So that is the approach that I think should be the end goal for scaling Bitcoin, because it would be like the right way. You would have a way of scaling it that is post-quantum secure, very safe, no trusted setup, no cryptographic, gnarly cryptographic assumptions, highest scale, most battle-tested technology stack. That's I think the best way. There are other ways in order to verify proofs, like the BitVM method, which is really brilliant and ingenious, but it doesn't give you mathematical security. It gives you basically economic security based on bonds that could be taken if someone cheats. It's also a very viable approach, at least in the meantime. But I think the best long-term solution is to adapt a soft fork that would allow you to verify something like a Stark and get covenants and a whole bunch of other things.
Yeah, and it's very exciting that now it's possible to get covenants directly on Bitcoin, though at a higher cost. It's still a great feat that was accomplished. And very, very exciting times indeed. And with the possibility, as you mentioned, of implementing a covenant as an L2 that verifies a Stark, also very promising. And I like how you also mentioned that there are some other ways in which we can verify proofs, like with the BitVM method, but it has its own limitations, as you mentioned, providing that kind of economic security instead of mathematical security behind it. So thank you for all of those points. I wanted to dive a bit deeper into OpCat specifically. I know that the StarkWare team is in very high support for the inclusion of OpCat. I'm curious to hear some of the main advantages that will be enabled. So you mentioned that in terms of enabling covenants, can enable verification as well, enable the implementation for Starks. But then I also want to also hear about if there are any kinds of drawbacks or limitations to adopting OpCat, if, say, we were to in the future.
Yeah, so I think the one could ask, what is the security and safety of Bitcoin compromised by OpCat? I am not aware of any significant attack that cannot be done today that OpCat in the latest proposals would open up. So I don't think it's about that. I think that, well, first of all, there's this, especially after the whole SegWit, wars and so on, there's this very strong aversion or concern about any sort of change for Bitcoin, which I respect. I understand. It's a very precious thing that that carries over $2 trillion worth of value. So we want to be extremely careful with it. At the same time, I think the biggest kind of concern of people is exactly about changing the ideological and philosophical, interpretation of what is Bitcoin, right? Because covenants indeed allow people to decide to put certain restrictions on the further use of their tokens. Of the tokens in the future. Now, Ethan Haleman told me that many of the cases that are attacked, covenants will allow, say, the government to do this or that, could also be attained. These sort of threat models could be attained already today by moving to multi-sig signatures, which already exist on Bitcoin. So if the governments would want tomorrow to say, every transaction must be conformant to some government regulations, they could implement it tomorrow with the requirement of multi-sigs very easily, even more easily than covenants. So I think the biggest criticism or the biggest opposition, ideological opposition to covenants, come from this worry that it changes the fungibility of Bitcoin, because certain Bitcoins can, at least for a limited time, be put under certain restrictions. But as Ethan Haleman at least convinced me, is that you could have these restrictions practically implemented today just with the use of multi-sigs, which already exist today on Bitcoin. So I understand the sort of conservative mindset. I have a lot of respect for it. I think that important things like Bitcoin should upgrade only very, very slowly and after a lot of deliberation and consensus. But I really, really hope that OpCat will be adopted in the near future, because I think it will improve what humanity gets from this marvelous invention that is Bitcoin.
Absolutely. So one of the biggest oppositions today against the adoption of OpCat is the worry that it changes, as you mentioned, the fungibility of Bitcoin and certain restrictions can be put under. But a main argument against that is that theoretically we could have those restrictions implemented just with the use of multi-sigs.
Not just theoretically, practically. The government could come tomorrow and say, through Coinbase or all kinds of centralized exchanges, just say, hey guys, if you want to be able to redeem those or convert these Bitcoin into local fiat and then have it sent to a bank account, well, we really need these Bitcoins to only be sent through multi-sigs in which the government is one of the parties, or right? This would effectively lead to very similar things that those worried of covenants are showing as the sort of attack and worrisome scenarios.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And that's just to highlight your point more on how there needs to be a deliberate amount of consensus, of just deliberation, slow rollouts before anything new is implemented. And I also wanted to ask you a bit more and speak a bit more about some of the potential changes in revenue or fee structures that we can see within these scaling solutions. So scaling solutions inevitably may introduce some new fee models, some new incentives. So how do you see the revenue or fee structures evolving if Bitcoin successfully implements these layer twos?
Yeah, so there's this big discussion of what happens with the sustainability of the Bitcoin economic model. How does Bitcoin pay for the electricity when mining rewards shrink to essentially zero? It's a huge discussion. Certainly, if there's more economic activity, there probably will be more fees to be collected by miners and all the parties operating it. That's just the nature of, you increase economic activity, you increase the amount of fees going around. So it will dramatically change things. Whenever there is a change in economic conditions, there are going to be those who benefit a little bit more from it or a little bit less. Take any economy that is expanding, right? There are like those who benefit a little bit more, those who benefit less. So it will change whatever is the distribution. But I think that that's a secondary consideration. The highest order thing is that you want this economy to grow. You want this marvelous thing that is Bitcoin to be usable by a larger fraction of the 10 billion humans that are alive on Earth right now. Right, the number of people who have transacted with the Bitcoin is probably much less than 1%. And you would like that to be a much higher percent that use it on a daily basis. So for that, I think you want these scaling solutions, and these scaling solutions will cause a lot more economic activity. And this will certainly support the miners and the larger Bitcoin ecosystem, and that is a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also wanted to speak a bit more about the advantages about specifically bringing Starks to Bitcoin and some of the kind of the effects that we can see. So what does bringing Starks to Bitcoin, like for example, if we were to implement a Stark proof system verifier within the Bitcoin script, what does this bring for the Bitcoin community? And how does implementing the Stark proof system compared specifically on Bitcoin compared to some of the other existing proof systems that we see? And I know you previously mentioned that we can enable for more post-quantum security with Stark specifically. There's no trusted setup. And very curious to hear about, because I know that the StarkWare team is also looking to implement Circle Starks in Bitcoin, what sort of new opportunities and also maybe some foreseeable challenges that you can see with the implementation of this.
Yeah, so the most important thing that users should care about is just that you'll get lower fees even as the scale goes up and up. And the reason is that Starks, especially something like, based on very small numbers, like Circle Stark, there are a few others. There's a Baby Bear Prime, and there are several systems that all of them have in common that they use very small numbers. These things just scale very well, and it means that generating a proof or processing many transactions is extremely efficient, much more than any other proof system out there. So the highest order effect to users is that you get much more scale for much lower cost, which is really very important. Now, other side benefits are that Bitcoin is Bitcoin not just because it's the first, it's also the purest when it comes to decentralization, security assumptions, trust assumptions. So if you scale it, you want to scale it in something that is also the purest. And Starks offer that. They are post-quantum secure. There are no trusted setup. There's no hidden backdoors that someone could potentially know. Literally, there are none. So you are basically getting the same security as Bitcoin, because you're extending its scale using only math and very, very trustworthy cryptography. The last thing is that with every day that goes, I hear of more and more teams adopting Stark as their scaling solutions. And there's just already an abundance of code bases that support, RISC-V and Cairo and EVM and many other VMs. So you will get this sort of, I think Starks will be like the analog of, something like the x86 standard for CPUs, will be something that is just very robust, has a lot of, backends and front ends. So I think that's really the way to go also for Bitcoin.
And I do like how you mentioned that Bitcoin is the purest in terms of its decentralization, in terms of its trust and security assumptions. And it's really great that Starks are able to be used as a tool to extend its scale. And hopefully we can see it live up to, as you mentioned, the x86 standard for CPUs will become as prevalent. But I also wanted to hear a bit more on some of the potential applications that you see on StarkNet that would benefit from settling on Bitcoin, and how these applications can expand the capabilities of the Bitcoin ecosystem.
So StarkNet is already home to the most advanced gaming, DeFi, AI solutions that require a lot of computation whose integrity must be proven from first principles using math. There's no other layer 1 or layer 2 that offers the same amount of compute today. And this is already put to use by, as I said, a lot of the advanced things that people are playing with, AI, gaming, fully on-chain gaming and stuff like that. So now you can imagine all of that connecting to the Bitcoin economy and creating like this really, really powerful global economy that is based on the Bitcoin standard, uses Bitcoin and its assumptions as the only assumptions, has the best security, the largest mind share. This is like the shelling point of the world economy.
Absolutely. And just scoping out a bit, I'm wondering if you can speak about some of the next steps that you envision for StarkWare's involvement in Bitcoin scaling. What can the community who's listening in the audience expect in terms of the roadmap?
So users are going to see very good UX for trading safely and self-custodially with Bitcoin and Bitcoin-related assets like runes, inscriptions, stuff like that. Developers are going to see a place where a lot of like-minded developers who share our vision of a fully self-custodial layer 2 that scales Bitcoin under Bitcoin's principles and allows you to truly own your assets. This is a place they're already starting to converge to and agree that this is like, the place to build your Bitcoin applications that go beyond just sending a Bitcoin on the network. And I'm a big optimist. I think you'll see this like a big flourishing ecosystem of developers, applications, and users that truly own their life and their assets on Bitcoin and transact in ever more meaningful ways, in a way that basically takes the power and ownership back and brings it back to individuals and also to small developer teams, from taking it back from like centralized banks and exchanges and these big corporations who are very good at distribution, but when it comes to truly distributing value among the individuals that constitute their community, you prefer something that's a bit more like Bitcoin, and that's what we'll give them.
Mm-hmm. And I like how you shape it as a big flourishing ecosystem where developers, users, applications can interact and who can like truly own their own assets on Bitcoin. I think that vision is something that we should all really emphasize and work towards. And just as a last question before we close, I'm wondering about its broader implications as we see more mainstream adoption on Bitcoin. If Bitcoin successfully scales with ZK proofs, how do you see this influencing other industries or other blockchain networks? Could this spark a wave of multi-chain interoperability with Bitcoin as the primary settlement layer? Or could this development ultimately render other blockchains as obsolete? What do you predict in terms of if we were to see when we see the mainstream adoption of Bitcoin, how this will affect other chains and even other industries?
So I envision this integrity web, just like the World Wide Web is a peer-to-peer network in which there are many, many different protocols and systems that are connected to provide us with a lot of information. So I see on top of it an integrity web that is a lot of interconnected protocols and centers of economic value of various forms, national currencies, cryptocurrencies of various forms, and they're all connected. And what you get is this integrity web on top of the World Wide Web, which delivers us a layer of integrity that we know that the right thing is being done, even when we are not watching. And once we have this integrity web in which Bitcoin is a very dominant part, whether Bitcoin is the only thing around or whether there are 2 or 5 or 50 or a million blockchains, I think once you have this level of integrity, of decentralization and broadness, the world and the market will decide how to shape this integrity web. But I view this very large integrity web that is used by all of us. And I have no doubt that a lot of the stuff that we invented and pushed forward, like ZK Starks and dedicated VMs that are lead to very efficient Stark proving, things like Cairo, will be a very important part in this integrity web. They won't be the only thing around, but they will be a very important part. Just like if you take any particular protocol or component of the World Wide Web, it is not equal to the World Wide Web, but it could be something very important. DNS servers, right? They are not the only thing out there, but they're like a very important component. So I'm sure that our technology will be a very important component in this integrity web.
Mm-hmm. And I really like how StarkWare has this broader vision for this integrity web. And the main goal is building towards this and having Starks as a component of that integrity web and Bitcoin as a part of it as well. So really like how you're building towards that broader vision with integrity webs. But thank you so much, Eli, for sharing all these insights on the need to scale Bitcoin, StarkWare's role in this endeavor. Really liked how the points you made on Bitcoin as a basis for an economy and how we're now transitioning into not having Bitcoin just as digital gold, but as digital cash that's completely ownable by users. And then also thank you for all of the insights, for the opportunities for governance, implications, for the implementation of OpCat as well, and some of its other applications. So really appreciate all of the insights you brought here today. And thank you so much, Eli, for joining us.
Thank you, Alice. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Now I'll hand it back to Ashley. Thank you so much, everyone.